As was already said, we're not there yet. But we were not there even before COVID. Or I remember when I was writing a previous volume of this book, The Engine of Growth actually was the name. We were still not there. But maybe there were some aspects of Caribbean private sector that were improving. But what happened then? Boom, you get hit by COVID-19 pandemic, right? So even if you were trying to get there, you go back then. Oh, bad news, right? So it's been said that the Caribbean is highly dependent on tourism, and tourism arrivals dropped significantly due to the travel restrictions imposed by the authorities. Can we see the next slide? As we see here, the impact was huge in terms of the tourism arrivals and tourism expenditure, because the high dependency of tourism in the Caribbean led to a deep decline in GDP growth. And in the book, we not only give evidence of the macro level and how the COVID-19 pandemic evolved in terms of cases and vaccination rates, but we also look at an important model. Well, it was not a model of the survey, but it included several questions regarding the effect that the Caribbean, the pandemic had on for example, the innovation that firms would pursue in the future. How likely was it that it would affect the business operations? So I invite you to go into the chapter and look into the firm level evidence that we present there on this chapter. So the starting point is like, if we were gonna be there, we're not there yet, because then we get hit by the pandemic. And then, so we moved to the next chapter, which is based on the business environment. We've been hearing from our colleagues right now about how important it is that the Caribbean needs a vibrant business environment so as to thrive. And in the book, we focus on a metric. Can we skip to the next slide, please? Next one. At the macro level, we know that the Caribbean has been doing relatively well in terms of investments. When we compare with Latin America, investment as a share of GDP has been relatively historically higher than in Latin America, and has been driven mainly by foreign direct investment, which is very, very high in the Caribbean. But other than that, we're not seeing the payoff, the growth payoff of these macro level investments, because can we move to the next slide, please? Because as was pointed out before, there are many barriers faced by Caribbean firms in terms of the enabling in terms of the environment they need to succeed. 2/3 of the Caribbean firms they have to make informal payments to public officials to get things done. These payments amount to up to on average to 3% of total annual sales, and they affect the smaller firms disproportionately. This is huge because informal payments, along with other the provision of services, are two of the metrics that we use to see if an enabling environment would lead to better performance on firms. And if we look at the next slide, please. So we can see that firms that operate in enabling business environments have huge payoffs in terms of their sales per worker or the total factor productivity. If you see there, sales per worker increases from $55.9 thousand US dollars to $178,000. So more than triples for women-owned base. We were talking about the importance of looking and disaggregating data between women and men-owned firms. So we can see that sales per worker more than triples in an enabling environment, and TFP is almost doubled when you have an enabling environment. We measure this in different ways, but I encourage you to read on this chapter to look into more details about how business environment can affect the performance of the private sector. And now I think it's time for the innovation chapter.
No, next slide.
Oh, you're right. So what are the constraints to business operations? So we've heard a lot about this. So access to finance, inadequately educated workforce. And rather than looking into the obstacles that firms face, the important message here is that the severity of the constraints has changed between 2010, which was the previous round of data that we have, and 2020. It's been, for all of the constraints that were listed in both surveys, you can see that in 2020, at least the perception of the firms is that the things are worse and they face a major or severe obstacle rather than compared to 2010. And access to finance happens to be one of the chapters of the book. The skills mismatch that was already covered by Dieter is presented in chapter 4. So this is a way of saying that all these hurdles that firms face are covered on the chapters of the book.